Hello, this is Dave D. Hilster. I'm a critical thinker. You got the t-shirt today. Dissident scientist, and if you are not science woke, then this is the place for you. There are literally thousands and thousands of scientists from around the world who've been working for decades outside the mainstream, who have identified problems, fixed those problems, and who are proposing new theories and models. You won't find anything like this on YouTube, so you want to make sure you go down below, click that little subscribe button and the little bell next to it, and you'll be alerted to when our next video drops. Well, this is part 2 of my going through the book, a book that is on my must read list for any science woke person. Why? Because it's about particle physics, and you're going to get a perspective that you do not hear anywhere else from a person that is really an amazing person. One of my favorites. He's become almost a friend of mine because I just keep making these videos. He loves it. In fact, I have some plans for us to do things in the future because I think he is an amazing spokesperson there in Europe, and here I am in the United States, and I think we together can even do better. I'm going to be talking about that in the future with this guy. But his name is, and there he is right there, Alexander Unzicker. And I want to read the back of this book for you. This is part 2. This is pretty good. The book is a merciless critique of the Large Hadron Collider at CERN and of the theoretical model on which the world's most expensive experiment is based. Unzicker, a German physicist and award-winning science writer, argues that the greatest physicists such as Einstein, Dirac, Schrödinger would have considered the discovery of the Higgs particle ridiculous. That's great. And according to the author, the Standard Model has grown unbelievably complicated and doesn't solve any of the great riddles of physics. Moreover, with their increasingly intricate techniques, particle physicists are fooling themselves with alleged results, while their convictions are based on groupthink and parroting. Although altogether, the data analysis cannot be overseen by anyone. What he says there in that last part, he's saying, oh, by the way, you can't see what we're doing. You can't look at it. You can't get the raw data. And of course, that's one of the biggest scams big science does to us, is they don't let us see the raw data. But again, a must read. And I'm going to go through the book. What I do is I'm going to start where I left off, and then I find little passages and things in the book that I find interesting, sort of catches my eye. No, I'm not telling you everything in the book because there's a lot of great stuff. But those things that catch my eye, I'm going to talk about, and that's what I'm doing today. So let's start off here. All this suggests that high energy physics, for decades, an evolutionary selection of collective opinions, uncritical group thinkers, skilled, narrow-minded mutants took place, while unorthodox thinkers, the independent mavericks, the individuals that rub you the wrong way, dropped out. So he basically is saying that, the collective opinions, the uncritical group thinkers, the skilled, the narrow-minded mutants. Hey, Alexander, why don't you tell us what you really feel? I love it. Pow! And then he calls unorthodox thinkers, the independent mavericks, and the individuals that rub you the wrong way, dropped out. Those are critical thinkers. Those are science woke people, and that's who we are, and that's who I hope you are, or at least getting there. No wonder their course is so uniform today. Whoever once enters the game will never be capable of nourishing serious doubts on the Standard Model, even if the evidence would suggest it. It is just too difficult, too poignant, too self-destructive to say, my diploma is BS, my PhD is BS, all my papers are BS. A forbidden insight. Well, again, what's really amazing to me is this came out not too long after the Higgs boson. Be careful, don't call it the Higgs particle. You call it the God particle, but not the Higgs particle. It's the Higgs. Get the unicorns' names right. Anyways, let's keep going through the book. Pick out some more chapters here. Oh, this framing, Dave. Get this. There we go. Get the framing right. People, when they do photos, they put their head in the middle, and then from here up, you can just throw it away. So any of people want to know cinematography, fill the frame. Okay, next going on. I love these. If there's one thing in this book, and again, look, it's not that thick. You don't have to, it's not like, oh my God, Dave, I can't read about particle physics. It's just, no, it's like 130, 40 pages long. But it's chock full of great things. And one of my favorite things, I love this book because of that. And I also love the writing by Alexander Unzicker. He picks out these sayings and these phrases from everywhere, not just physics. It is hard to make someone understand something when his income is based on not understanding it. That means people who are stuck in their ways and are doing particle physics, it's really hard for them to criticize something because their income isn't based on criticism. It's based on building upon what they said and all those billions of dollars that are being spent. So how could they come along and say, you know what? For the last 80 years in particle physics, we've been wasting our time, been wasting billions of dollars and wasting the brain power of lots of young people. And that's one thing Dr. Alexander Unzicker echoes through his books, is what a waste of the human brain power. I know my mentor, Dr. Ricardo Carrazzani, always said that. Friends and enemies. A friend of mine, a nuclear physicist, once advised me that criticism should always be constructive. The idea appeals to me, however, when talking about particle physics. I think it is out of place to be constructive. Absolutely. Literally, much too much has been constructed when building the Higgly-Piggly standard model. Again, you can see he's trying to be politically correct. Not, which is what I love about this book. Yet, there is a simple mechanism why this occurs in science. If you work on a fashionable idea, it is very easy to make friends. You join a group or form a new one. If instead you challenge an established concept on which many people are working, they will be your enemies. Great stuff. This book is so well written. It really tells you about what's going on in particle physics. And Dr. Unzicker, who has his degree in physics, should know, because he's writing about science, and he's one of the few people out there. Well, that's not true. There are other people, but they're ignored by the mass press because, the people who give them the money don't want to publish things like this. They don't want to talk about the Higgs Fake interview Alexander Unzicker because they're given all this money, and what are they going to say? We just threw it away for nothing on unicorns? Every fool believes what his teachers tells him. I'm going to read that again. Dave, can you read? Every fool believes what his teachers tell him and calls his credulity science or morality as confidently as his father called it divine revelation. This is George Bernard Shaw. Let's read that again. It's a lot of times these sayings, and if they're older sayings, you got to really read it and understand this construction of it. I got a master in linguistics. Sometimes I got to go back. He says, every fool believes what his teachers tell him. Pretty understandable. And calls his credulity science or morality as confidently as his father called it divine revelation. So what he's saying is that people, if I'm a teacher, any fool can believe what the teacher tells him, and you call his truthfulness, his credulity, you call it science or even morality, as confidently as his father called it divine revelation, which of course divine revelation is something that of course you cannot question. You are given the truths of the universe. Here they are. You do not question them. You are not a critical thinker. You're not a science woke person. That's one of the great sayings in this book. I just clip them, capture them, and go on here. Let's go on to the next. An important factor in the repression. Okay, an important factor in the repression of critical thoughts is conferences. This is really good. Although we have a conference every year, and it's at the University of Washington. I invite everybody who's a critical thinker around that area to come to it. It's really worth your while. You get people like myself and a lot of us arguing and talking about new ideas and things. It is just super refreshing. There's no conference in the world like it. So you really want to check it out. Go to our website you can go to 2019.naturalphilosophy.org. Read all about it. And we've already opened up registration. Okay, conferences. It says, okay, with their short-lived fashions, their excessive focus on the present, conferences are among the most counterproductive things in science. It is the very situation in a conference room with several. It is the very situation in a conference room with several hundreds of scientists talking in the naturalness about established concepts, quark color, neutrino oscillations, etc. He picks on the things that are, there's unicorn science and there's bad unicorn science that psychologically forbids you to suspect that this concept might be nonsense. If you even go to these conferences and say something like that, they look at you as if you just spoke Chinese and they don't know any Chinese. Conferences are intimidating, brainwashing ceremonies, forging clean collective opinions. They have no use at all besides the small side benefit of providing cheap vacations for researchers. No discovery will ever be achieved as a consequence of a conference. And I wanted to say something here. Not only about that, I agree with that completely. When you have the groupthink and you cannot be a dissident, you cannot be a critical thinker amongst these people, you certainly can't criticize or even disagree with them. The interesting thing is that is one of the reasons I say that our science organization is the best in the world. Yes, on sciencewoke.org, go to it. Oh, you can't get there yet because we're still working on it. One of the articles I wrote is, why is the John Chappell Natural Philosophy Society the best science organization in the world? Well, it's simple, because we encourage dissidents. We have to write scientific papers in scientific ways and do it professionally like anybody else. But the difference is you can come and say, this is why the Big Bang's wrong, and here is my reasoning, and we discuss it. We don't care what your titles are, because what I say in my movie at the very end, after 8 years, I came with this one simple phrase. I think Lisa Hausman, one of my subscribers said, "What did you say, David? I want to use that." Yeah. Don't listen to me, listen to what I say. And so when you come to our conferences at the CMPS, you get up there. We don't care. We've got people, literally, our chief scientist will get up there and talk this year, and she will talk. And what's her degree in? It's in physics. In fact, her dissertation, or PhD dissertation from MIT, is on relativity, special relativity. And guess what she talks about? How we have to revisit it because it's probably all wrong. So when she gets up there and speaks, or when a person who gets up there has no degree in physics whatsoever, I don't even know who they are or what they are doing, I am listening to what they are saying. You can come up with a great app and never be a programmer. You can come up with a great novel and never have written before in your life. Why does that? What am I saying? It matters what you say, not who you are. So, in this sense, right here, what Alexander Unzicker is talking about is conferences by the people in the mainstream. Groupthink, you're going to go there, you're going to be indoctrinated. And ours, completely different. All right, let's keep moving along. Lack of transparency. Where nobody can oversee that business. And this is a real problem. Give us the raw data, is what I say. Michael Faraday, the legendary discoverer of electromagnetic induction, conducted about 10,000 experiments in his life. All of them meticulously documented in his lab notes. At the Large Hadron Collider, about 10,000 people are conducting one experiment. I also remember when the up quark or down quark, I don't care. But the last quark to be discovered, it was 1993 or 94. I was working in the research group, in the artificial intelligence group at Research Park, Space Park at TRW. And I was reading, somebody says, hey, we're going to take a look at this lecture. I don't know, it was a meeting inside the group or whatever, and said, hey, they've discovered the up quark or the down quark or whatever ones they couldn't find. And the number of authors on the paper totaled over 900. Now, do you think that 900 people got together and really worked on this paper? And basically, they got together, wrote a paper, said how they're going to find the quark that they're looking for, the last one which they couldn't find. And amazing enough, 6 months later, they found it. Wow, how amazing is that? And why were there so many? Because they all want to be part of, oh, I'm one of the 900 discoverers of the up quark, down quark, sideways quark. That's what they do. And that's what he's talking about. Okay, so he say, go figure if this is the same kind of science as 200 years ago. No, it's not. Obviously, it's not. The sheer number of people in big science creates inherent problems. Alvin Weinberg and Derek de Sola Price have written insightful books about this. There you go. That's what I love about great books is they give you, I got to go find those books and read them. You too can do that. And CERN's collaborations are the biggest ever. It is impossible that anybody can maintain an overview about how the experiment actually works. This is very true, and this is very true in computer science today. There are so many projects. I work not TRW. I work at LexisNexis. I love it. Probably going to retire there. Work with a bunch of brainiacs, incredible people around me. They work on the HPCC high performance computing clusters written in C++ and deal with big data. And not one person, maybe close to a couple people, but really probably even now, not one person in the group, even though it's a smaller group, knows everything about the system. They can't. I know one person that may be close to it, but it's the same way with Microsoft or Apple. There's the systems that we are using today, the operational systems, the operating systems, even a big program that you use to edit photos or whatever. Not one person knows everything about it. And that's what's happening, of course, in physics, which means when we're discovering a particle, if there's not a person who knows everything that goes on with it, how are they finding these things? Well, the top people at the top layer who are looking for the unicorns, they have a way to do that. And if you haven't seen it, go to my, this is at 17 minutes in, but go right up there in part 1. I talk about a little bit about that from the Higgs Fake book, which I'm talking about right now. So go back to the first one and watch that. If you haven't seen it, if you've fallen upon this video, just ask anyone involved in the experiment in a little more detail about the background radiation damping, a basic unsolved problem, and you soon arrive at the point where they assure you that all of this has been done properly. You easily underestimate the complexity of the task. You need to understand the detector. Many people have checked this. Everybody relies on each other, but no one really understands the experiments in its entirety. And so you get lip service. Of course we know what's going on. Of course this has been done. We have great people. What do you think? We're nuts that we're going to allow it? Blah, 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 blah. None of the detector components are understood at the fundamental level. This is no criticism, in the sense that their response can be calculated from first principles. They all have to be tested, calibrated, and a lot of simplifying assumptions enter here. I think what's really important here to me, as a person who's hung out for over 2 decades, for 25 years, with some of the greatest minds outside of mainstream science, outside of big science, is that they're all acutely aware of this. My father and I are acutely aware of this with our model. We don't have physical models for what light is, for what gravity is, for magnetic fields are, or electromagnetic fields are. We really don't know. You have to throw away quarks and all those things. We know there's a nucleus and we know there's something going around it, but that's about it. And we have some rules for it that work pretty well, but our models aren't great. If you go to the periodic table, you don't have one electron. You don't have the numbers come out in integers. There's all kinds of stuff. The basics. We don't even know what we're accelerating, really. We don't know how it's really being accelerated. We can write equations and about how fast it's going to go and how big and how much electricity we'll put in to make it go, but we don't even know physically what's going on with the thing. So he's saying none of the detector components are understood at the fundamental level, and yet we're using it to find the secrets of the universe, and we don't even know what the hammer, how the hammer we're using works, because that's all it is. It's a big hammer. So I thought that was a really great. That sort of triggered me a little bit toward a little embellishing what Alexander Unzicker talks about here. Let's make this a little bit bigger here. What bothers me more than that, when you read the Large Hadron Collider results, they are usually published at the top level, discussing the particles, which particles could be interpreted as having decayed from the Higgs boson. But there are multiple layers of assumptions beneath, and the more one goes down and approaches the raw data, the sparser the publications become. What he's saying here is that they publish all this stuff at the high levels about the particles and what it means and all this. And then when you say, hey, let's get down to the nitty gritty and tell me how this is done and tell me how you got there, you get a lot less publication about it. It's sort of, why? Because it's a house of cards. Here again, we encounter the phenomenon that it is much more pleasing to deal with the big questions rather than dig into the dirty business of detector components, their difficult response behavior, calibration problems, and so on. Basically, everything that you're basing on should be, can you imagine that? Can you imagine people at NASA or people at SpaceX saying, going up to Elon Musk, hey, Elon Musk, we got this capsule, man. It's got great controls. It's going to be really comfortable. And there's not going to be a lot of distractions. You're going to be able to see all kinds of things. Hey, yeah, but what are you building it with? Well, we've got 50 people working on this capsule. It's going to look great. We're going to have animations and all. And how many have you put on to actually build it? Oh, there's a couple of people doing that. But don't worry about that. They're going to handle it. We know. What? Can you imagine that? It's the opposite. You got one guy at the top, and you got a lot of worker bees, and the more people that are dealing with when the bolts hit the metal, it hits the computing, hits the wiring, all the components that go into this. And you got to know everything about it. That doesn't happen in the particle physics world. That's what Alexander Unzicker is saying. Reproducibility is at the heart of science. This is another thing he talks about, reproducibility. I'm going to make this bigger here. Is at the heart of science, the key element of scientific methodology. The thing that distinguishes physics from spoon bending, astrology, and all kinds of snake oil activities, or what I call unicorns, which are particle physics. You have to be able to repeat something in all places, at all times, with different people in different laboratories. Particle physics has a problem with this. CERN is an expensive lab, but for a gigantic particle accelerator, the world can only afford build once. Reproducibility is not that easy. That's a very sarcastic and understatement of this in this book, right? Basically, he's saying, well, how can we check this? Oh, we got to build another collider that big. You can't do it. It's just too expensive. You can only build one. This is it. It's like the whole moonshot. It's all in one thing. So, very important point. Reproducibility. Now, some of the smaller labs are actually coming back and saying, we can do some of this. But then again, all particle physics is based on all those interactions. When you see something, there's an explosion. They have all these rules they've made up along the way, and they keep using and saying, oh yeah, we know what's going on here, which is not true. If you sat engineers down with this and sat them down through the process, they would probably within a day or two say it's a bunch of baloney. It's not even worth digging into, because the methodologies used would be would reveal so quickly the folly of the way they do science and the reproducibility, all this stuff. I think engineers, people like from space shots, people who build these systems that go into space, they would, in a very short amount of time, just laugh at this and say, I'm not even going any further because it's resting on quicksand. Let's keep going here. And what about the millions of lines of computer code that are essential for analysis? For all this, there is no documentation that would merit the name, because the whole business is a present-focused, funded-oriented, and arrogantly as a historical enterprise that prefers the scientific quick buck to the thorough investigation of the laws of nature. Why should anyone care for a longer period of time than his funding award, let alone for longer than his career? Particle physics has reached a state of non-falsifiability, non-testability, inscrutableness, a paradise for ideology to flourish. Basically, what he's saying is that we have come to a period that people are so much in the present, so much that they're worried about their funding, so much worry about what they've done just today, that they throw away the idea that we even have to document the millions of lines of computer code. We have to go, and one of the things he talks about, it may not may have slipped past you, is about history. He talks about where does he say that? Millions of people, because the whole business of parent focus funding owner arrogant. Okay, here, arrogantly a historical enterprise. He talks about this throughout the book, Alexander Unzicker. He talks about we don't have to go back and say, well, where did we come from? Who were the people before? Making sure that those people, when you learn about anything in college or in university, you build upon, okay, with this, and you want to make sure they don't go and teach you about how to program without at least giving you courses about how assembly works and how a computer works. So that's what he's saying. And it's this, just write it, just do it, just take whatever was written as gospel, not even checking, not to see if he talks about in the book, read it yourself, buy the book, that there are lots and lots and lots of errors that can be introduced in the coding. No one seems to care. No one even looks at it. Anyways, I told you I would just stop in the middle. It's like 27 minutes in, and I know these things go a long time. I just do clips. I'm going to come back with the Higgs particle version, looking at his book, the Higgs Fake. I call it the particle. Who cares? It doesn't exist. The Higgs Fake. I'm going to have another one. And you don't want to miss buying this book. Buy it in an ebook, whatever. Read it through. You may have to read it through a couple times because these sentences, even the sayings, are chock full. It takes me a time. I've read through this book many times. And I'll be back again with I think probably the third and final part of my series on the Higgs Fake. A must read. And remember what I said, stay critical, stay thinking. I am David D. Hilster. I'm your science therapist trying to get you to the promised land of being science woke and a critical thinker. Ciao for now.